Good, good. So, thank the Lord, it's another Sunday, able to be in church. I want to say, I thought about it during the week. I just wanted to say I appreciate everyone in here, everyone that takes the time out of their week to come in and sit and listen to me for 45 minutes on a Sunday. I appreciate y'all, and thank the Lord for each one of you. And so anyway, if you have your Bible, turn to Jeremiah chapter number 39. Jeremiah chapter number 39. And we're going to try and wrap everything up with a bow right here. For the kings of Israel and Judah. Really, we're in Judah, or dealing with the king of Judah. But anyway, we're going to try and wrap it all up with a bow this week. And we may do just a little bit more just of what happens after this, because the story doesn't necessarily end right here. We may do another week or two, but we're pretty much done with this right here, and then we're going to move on to some other stuff. And so I don't know about y'all if y'all have enjoyed it, but I have thoroughly enjoyed studying it, and I've enjoyed. I was thinking about it. When you read your Bible through, which most of us, you read your Bible through, you just start in Genesis and work your way through. And it's funny because the way the Bible's laid out, you read about the kings, and you read them in Kings, and you read them in Chronicles, and then you have to get all the way over towards Isaiah and then Jeremiah before you pick them up again, and it's not fresh in your mind. But if you're reading about them, and you're also reading the correlating passages, again, which is how I tried to teach it, hey, here's where we're reading in the Kings, but over here is the correlating passages in the other books of the Bible, and you just pick up so much more than just what you read in the Kings. Or if you're just reading over in Jeremiah, you kind of can put the whole story together. And so I've really enjoyed studying it out and reading the passages together instead of just reading it here and then a month or two later then reading it over there and be like, I think I remember something about that guy. But anyway, and so we're actually going to do some of that this morning. We're gonna introduce a guy, and we're gonna have our memory refreshed about some people. But in Jeremiah chapter number 39. In verse number 1, it says, in the 9th year of Zedekiah, king of Judah, in the 10th month, came Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, and all his army against Jerusalem, and they besieged it. And in the 11th year of Zedekiah, in the 4th month, in the 9th day of the month, the city was broken up. And all the princes of the king of Babylon came in and sat in the middle gate, even Nergal-Sharezer, Samgar-Nebo, Sarsekim, Rabsaris, Nergal-Sharezer, Rabmag, with all the residue of the princes of the king of Babylon. And it came to pass that when Zedekiah the king of Judah saw them, and all the men of war, then they fled, and went forth out of the city by night by the way of the king's garden, by the gate betwixt the two walls, and he went out the way of the plain. But the Chaldean army pursued after them, and overtook Zedekiah in the plains of Jericho. And when they had taken him, they brought him up to Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, to Riblah in the land of Hamath, where he gave judgment upon him. Then the king of Babylon slew the sons of Zedekiah in Riblah before his eyes. Also the king of Babylon slew all the nobles of Judah. Moreover, he put out Zedekiah's eyes and bound him with chains to carry him to Babylon. And the Chaldeans burned the king's house and the houses of the people with fire, and brake down the walls of Jerusalem. Then Nebuzaradan, the captain of the guard, carried away captive into Babylon the remnant of the people that remained in the city, and those that fell away, that fell on him with the rest of the people that remained. But Nebuzaradan, the captain of the guard, left to the poor of the people which had nothing in the land of Judah, and gave them vineyards and fields at the same time. Now Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, gave charge concerning Jeremiah to Nebuzaradan, the captain of the guard, saying, take him, and look well to him, and do him no harm, but do unto him even as he shall say unto thee. So Nebuzaradan, the captain of the guard, sent, and Nebuchadnezzar, Rabsaris, and Nergal-Sharezer, Rabmag, and all the king of Babylon's princes. Even they sent and took Jeremiah out of the court of the prison and committed him into Gedaliah, the son of Ahikam, the son of Shaphan, that he should carry him home. So he dwelt among the people. Now the word of the Lord came unto Jeremiah while he was shut up in the court of the prison, saying, Go and speak to Ebed-melech the Ethiopian, saying, Thus saith the Lord of hosts, the God of Israel, Behold, I will bring my words upon this city for evil and not for good, and they shall be accomplished in that day before thee. But I will deliver thee in that day, saith the Lord, and thou shalt not be given into the hand of the men of whom thou art afraid. For I will surely deliver thee, and thou shalt not fall by the sword, but thy life shall be for a prey unto thee, because thou hast put thy trust in me, saith the Lord. So, again, that is Jeremiah chapter number 39 right there. And so we're looking at the end of the kings of Judah right here, and we're going to look at the final moments that Zedekiah reigns in Judah, in Jerusalem, and we know that he's going to be taken into captivity. But when we read this chapter, again, when we read this chapter, you see, even in this chapter was bouncing chronologically all over the place. It was bouncing kind of all over the place, because what we talked about when he talked about Ebed-melech, he was actually, Jeremiah was in the court of the prison, and this was before that Zedekiah had tried to escape. And so when you're reading this, and again, I've mentioned this many times before, even when you're reading Jeremiah, it's kind of bouncing back and forth, and you kind of have to figure out, where he's at when he's talking about this. And so I read last week, let me find it real quick. I read last week, right at the end of my lesson, I read about Ezekiel, because Ezekiel was also prophesying in this time right here. And you don't have to turn here, but in chapter number 24, I didn't read this verse, but in chapter number 24 of Ezekiel, the first verse says, And again in the 9th year, in the 10th month, in the 10th day of the month, the word of the Lord came unto me. And so when Ezekiel was prophesying, the prophecy that I read last time, or what I read to you whenever God told Ezekiel that, hey, I'm going to take the desire of your eyes away, and you're not allowed to mourn, you're not allowed to do anything but just go on with life. And he's going to use him as an example. He's going to use him as an example that, hey, this is what y'all are going to have to do. And so, I read to you last week where he said that, that he went and spoke in the morning, and in the evening his wife died, and he had to just carry on. And he had to explain to them, when the people ask, hey, well, why are you just carrying on? Why are you not mourning? We know you loved your wife. We know that God called her the desire of your eyes. We know that she was the desire of your eyes. Why are you just going on? And then he explained to them that God was going to take away the desire of their eyes. They were going to lose their sons and their daughters. They were going to lose their houses and their land. They were going to lose all those things that they held so important, and they were just going to have to be carried away into captivity and just deal with it. And so Jeremiah was not the only one speaking to Judah at this time. Ezekiel was also speaking to Judah, and again, like I said, in verse 24 or chapter 24, verse 1, again in the 9th year, in the 10th month, in the 10th day of the month, in chapter 39, which I read to you, and in the 9th year of Zedekiah, king of Judah. In the 10th month. So again, this is at the same time period that Ezekiel is telling them, hey, look, y'all are going to be taken into captivity. Jeremiah has already told them over and over and over again, but here, whenever Nebuchadnezzar comes up, he comes up against the city. This time, the people of Judah should have known, we're not getting out of this. We're not getting out of this. We're not going to escape. Why? Because one of their biggest problems is they refuse to call on God. They just refuse. We talked about that a lot last week. They would not call on God. They go to their false gods, and they tried to get out of it of their own devices, but they were not getting out of it. And they were not going to get out of it. And so for basically 18 months, in verse number 2, it says, in the 11th year of Zedekiah in the 4th month. So basically about 18 months, the Chaldean army had the city surrounded. So you can imagine, I mean, we're having shortages right now. I went to the dollar store to get Laffy Taffy the other day. Brother Parks, in the dollar store didn't even have Laffy Taffy. And I was very upset because I had it on the brain, and I'm like, you know what sounds good? Just some taffy. That sounds good. And so I stopped at the dollar store, and I went in there and I looked, and you walk even in the candy aisle. The candy aisle is like 75% empty. And so I ended up with like some sour straws or something like that, just to crave just to satisfy my sweet tooth. But it wasn't what I wanted. I wanted some taffy. And so, but I mean, you go into the dollar store, you go into Walmart, or you go wherever you shop for groceries, you go in there and the shelves are, some of them are 75% full, some of them are only 50% full. You walk through an aisle and you're like, well, I guess I won't be eating that this week. Because it's just not there, and I don't understand why we're having a taffy shortage. If someone can explain to me what ingredient that we're having trouble getting why we can't have taffy right now, I'd appreciate it. But apparently we're having a taffy shortage. But you imagine, I mean, we don't even have that much going on. I mean, they got a war in Ukraine. That they're trying to blame everything that's wrong with anything in the world right now is a war in Ukraine. I mean, if Ford has a recall on their cars in the next year or two, it's going to be because of the war in Ukraine. But, I mean, they got this war in Ukraine going on, and we had COVID, but, I mean, it's like, okay, I mean, we're kind of through that now, and everyone's kind of back up to work, but it's like, no, we're not back. We're still way short. And we are. We were looking at some orders the other day. Levi was trying to look up an order for something that we sold at work, and Bob was looking at the back order on it. He said there was over 100 Sams that were on back order. 100 on back order. And so we were trying to figure out when one was going to ship, because I went up and the guy's like, hey, you're supposed to be here on the 20th. And I'm thinking, 20th of December maybe, but not the 20th of June. But anyway, I'll be glad to check on that for you. But I mean, you imagine being in a city where the army has surrounded that city, and you better have a lot of stuff, stored up. And if you remember that even whenever Zedekiah, consented to let Jeremiah go in prison and said, hey, go ahead and feed him bread as long as we got some. Now, that's my terminology for it, but if you remember, it was basically, hey, feed him bread as long as we got bread, Jeremiah gets some bread too. Again, so they were worried, they were concerned, and so for 18 months, this city was surrounded, and you know what? There comes a point in time where you got a couple options. Either the people of the city are like, we're going to break out. We're going to break out, and we're going to try and get to some food, or the people of the city are going to be like, okay, we're done. I mean, we're all starving to death in here. We're fighting to save a city that's not going to be saved, and we're going to starve to death. We're either going to starve to death in here, or they're just going to come in and take over, and we're just going to have to give ourselves up. And the shame of it is that's what Ezekiel and Jeremiah had been telling them. They had been telling them, hey, look, you know what? You're not going to save yourself. You're not going to save yourself. You're not going to save the city. You need to just basically turn yourself into go out to the Chaldeans and submit to the Chaldeans and go on about your life. But they wouldn't do it, and so they stayed and they stayed and they stayed and they stayed and they wouldn't go. So 18 months they stayed in there, and so whenever the Chaldeans finally did come in, they didn't meet any resistance. They didn't meet much resistance at all, because they just came in and they just took over. They came in and took over. And so you see in verse number 3, it says, and all the princes of the king of Babylon came in and set in the middle gate, and then I'm not going to read those names right now, but in Jeremiah chapter number 1, in verse number 14, it says, "Then the Lord said unto me, out of the north an evil shall break forth upon all the inhabitants of the land. For lo, I will call all the families of the kingdoms of the north, saith the Lord, and they shall come, and they shall set every one his throne at the entering of the gates of Jerusalem, and against all the walls thereof round about, and against all the cities of Judah. And I will utter my judgments against them, touching all their wickedness, who have forsaken me, and have burned incense unto other gods, and worshiped the works of their own hands." And so he said, look, he said, I'm telling you, Jeremiah told them from the very beginning that these people were coming from the north, and they were going to set up their thrones. They were going to set up their thrones in the city. They were going to set it up. And so you see right here in verse number 3 that they come in and they set up in the middle gate. They set themselves up. And so in verse number 4, Zedekiah sees it and he said, all right, I've held out as long as I can hold out. I've held out as long as I can hold out. I've held out, until I can't hold out anymore. They've come in the city. They're now sitting in the gate. And they're not supposed to be there, but they're now sitting in the gate, and I'm going to have to do something. And so in verse number 4, it says that when he saw them, all the men of war, then they fled. And so here's Zedekiah and some of his group that they decide, hey, we're going to have to get out of here. We're going to have to flee. We're gonna have to get out of here and get away, or we're not going to get away. Well, guess what? His opportunity to get away passed him a long time ago because he refused to heed the warning. He refused to heed the warning of Jeremiah. He refused to heed the warning of Ezekiel. Look at this right here in Ezekiel. Well, you don't have to turn here, but in Ezekiel chapter number 12, verse number 9. Verse 8, "And in the morning came the word of the Lord unto me, saying, Son of man, hath not the house of Israel, the rebellious house, said unto thee, What doest thou? Say thou unto them, Thus saith the Lord God, This burden concerneth the princes in Jerusalem, and all the house of Israel that are among them. Say, I am your side. Like as I have done, so shall it be done unto them. They shall remove and go into captivity. And the prince that is among them shall bear upon his shoulder in the twilight, and shall go forth. They shall dig through the wall." So I didn't read the beginning verses right here, but in the beginning of chapter 12, God tells Ezekiel, here's what I want you to do. I want you to pack your stuff up like you're going into captivity. And I want you to parade around like someone who would be going into captivity. And I want the people to see you. And then I want you to take your stuff, and I want you to go to the wall, and I want you to dig through the wall, and dig through the wall, and I want them to see you do that. And so that's what he's referencing here. But I didn't want to read all the verses 1 through 7. And they shall remove and go into captivity. And the prince that is among them shall bear upon his shoulder in the twilight. They shall go forth. They shall dig through the wall to carry out thereby. He shall cover his face, that he see not the ground with his eyes. So again, it appears to me that what he's saying here is they're going to try to escape. So they can't go where the people are, where the Chaldeans are. So they found them a spot in the wall, and they're going to try and dig through the wall, and they're going to cover the king's head so that you don't recognize him. So it's like, oh, it's just one of the poor people of the land. They try to hide him and try to deceive the Chaldeans that it's just one of the poor people of the land that was leaving. But again, you're trying to deceive the Chaldeans, but you're not deceiving God. He was not going to be able to deceive God, and God was not going to let him escape. And God had warned them. And so look at what he says. And in verse 13, "My net also will I spread upon him, and he shall be taken in my snare." So God said, hey, look, I'm not going to let him escape. I am not going to allow him to escape. Yes, it's the Chaldeans that are going to catch him, but I'm the one that's going to catch him in my snare. And I will bring him to Babylon, to the land of the Chaldeans. Look at what happens here. Yet shall he not see it, though he shall die there. So what's going to happen, what is going to happen to Zedekiah was prophesied also by Ezekiel, that they are going to take out his eyes. They're going to take out his eyes, because he said he will not see the land. Even though he's going to die in Babylon, he's not going to see the land. And so again, it was not just Jeremiah. It was not just Jeremiah that was saying, hey, you need to turn yourself over while you can, or it's going to be bad for you. It was also Ezekiel that was prophesying and was telling them, hey, there's some bad things about to come to pass. If you don't listen, if you don't heed the warning, if you don't go out to the Chaldeans while you can, it's going to be bad for you. And so in verse number 5 again, but the Chaldean army pursued after them and overtook Zedekiah in the plains of Jericho. And so again, but God said, you're not going to escape my snare. God said, hey, you can try and escape, but I'm the one that's going to trip you up. I'm going to hold you up, and then I'm going to allow the Chaldean army to get you. And it says, and when they had taken him, they brought him to Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, in Riblah, in the land of Hamath, where he gave judgment upon him. So he's going to give judgment upon Zedekiah. And again, it would be nice if you heard the words, but I wonder if some of the words of the judgment was, hey, were you not told? Were you not told by God through Jeremiah and through Ezekiel that you needed to turn yourself over to me while you had the chance? Were you not told that God said that he would take care of you and go and take care of the people if they would just go ahead and go? And so, but here Nebuchadnezzar pronounces judgment on him, and this was a tough judgment. This was a tough judgment. And remember, you got to remember that Zedekiah, he was scared to go because he didn't want people to make fun of him. If you remember last week, we talked about it last week. He said, hey, the people who have already left, the people who have already been taken captive, those people, they'll mock me. The Chaldeans will let them come up, and they'll make fun of me. And Jeremiah said, look, he said, first of all, they're not going to mock you. And I ask you, I implore you, please, just do what I'm telling you to do, and it'll go well for you. But if you don't, it's going to be bad. And that was in the previous chapter, in chapter number 38. It was like, hey, if you listen to me and you go, it'll be okay. But if you don't, it's going to be bad for you. And so he goes. So Nebuchadnezzar has him, but look what he does. Then the king of Babylon slew the sons of Zedekiah in Riblah before his eyes. I mean, again, imagine, and again, Zedekiah probably, if he remembered everything that God had tried to tell him, he should have known that he was going to lose his eyes. But, maybe he said, that's not going to happen. But imagine the last thing that you see before you ever, before you lose your eyes and never see again. The last thing you see is the death of your sons. The death of your sons being slain before your eyes. And that's the last vision. That's the last vision that you have. And every morning when you wake up and it's just darkness, and all you see, all you have is memories, because you can't see anything now. And one of the last things that's forever etched on your brain is the death of your sons. And he would completely bear the responsibility of the death of his sons because he refused to heed the warning of the men of God. He refused to heed the warning. And so he kills his sons before his eyes. And look right here. It says, also the king of Babylon slew all the nobles of Judah. Now let me turn back to 2 Kings Second Kings, I got it in my notes somewhere, but Second Kings chapter number 25, in verse 25, sorry, there's a 24 right there. In verse number 18. And in 2 Kings 25, verse number 18, and the captain of the guard took Seraiah, the chief priest, and Zephaniah, the second priest, and the three keepers of the door, and out of the city he took an officer that was set over the men of war, and 5 of them that were in the king's presence, which were found in the city, and the principal scribe of the host which mustered the people of the land, and 60 men of the people of the land that were found in the city. And Nebuzaradan, captain of the guard, took these and brought them to the king of Babylon in Riblah. And the king of Babylon smote them and slew them at Riblah in the land of Hamath. So Judah was carried away out of their land. So again, these were the people, these people right here in 2 Kings chapter number 25, verse 18 through verse 21, are the people that were being slain right there in Jeremiah chapter number 39. And so in verse number 7, again, we've spoken about it, but moreover, he put out Zedekiah's eyes and bound him with chains to carry him to Babylon. So again, like I said, the last thing he saw was his sons and his friends' eyes being put, or his sons being slain, these people that he trusted in, these people that, that he worked with, all these people that trusted in him. When you're the king, the buck stops with you. You're the man in charge. And they trusted in him that he was going to figure something out. Hey, he tried to get the Egyptian army to come up and help, and God said, no, not going to let that happen. Even though the Chaldeans left when the Egyptian army came up, God said, no, we're not going to let that happen. We're not going to let that happen. And it sent the Egyptian army back away, and the Chaldeans came back. And so, again, the last thing he sees is all this carnage, and so that has to be forever etched on his brain. In verse number 8, it says, and the Chaldeans burned the king's house and the house of the people with fire and break down the walls of Jerusalem. Now, that actually occurs like a month later. It looks like bam, bam, it just happened, but that actually occurs. It actually occurs about a month later in in 2 Kings 25 again, and verse number 8, and so I'll read verse 7. And they slew the sons of Zedekiah before his eyes, put out the eyes of Zedekiah, and bound him with fetters of brass, and carried him to Babylon. And in the 5th month, now if you remember, it was the 4th month. In the 5th month, on the 7th day of the month, which is the 19th year of King Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, came Nebuzaradan, captain of the guard, a servant of the king of Babylon unto Jerusalem, and he burnt the house of the Lord and the king's house, and all the houses of Jerusalem, and every great man's house burnt he with fire. And so again, from verse number 7 to verse number 8 in Jeremiah chapter 39 is actually there's basically a month's time that goes past between those two verses right there. So in verse number 9 they carry away the people, but we know also while they're carrying away the people, they're carrying away. Before they burn everything, they go into the house of God and they just take, and that's in 2 Kings 25 as well. I'm not going to read it for the sake of time, but they're carrying away basically anything that's good that's left. Anything that's good that's left, they're going to take it out of the house, the house of God or the king's house. They're taking that stuff out. Anything that's good that's left. They've already carried a bunch of stuff away before, but now anything that's left that's still good, it's like last call. You get it, whatever doesn't get got is going to get burned. And so they carry away captive the people, and they take the people to Babylon, and they leave some people. And it's interesting to me in verse number 10, it says, but Nebuzaradan, the captain of the guard, left of the poor of the people. Now, I'm intrigued by this, because if you think about it, Brother Parks, for 18 months they've been surrounded. 18 months they've been surrounded, and so they haven't been able to get supplies in. They haven't been able to get out. And so, I'm curious as to how he differentiated between, okay, these are the poor people and these are still the rich people. I mean, after 18 months and you're basically starving, are they still walking around in their three-piece suit? Are they still walking around in their evening gown saying, I'm still important because I still have my clothes, when they were all starving? And so I'm intrigued by the fact that somehow he could see, hey, these are poor people. These are the poor people. We don't want to take them with us. We're going to leave them here. And again, it didn't work out good for any of the people that got left in the land necessarily. but we'll look at that probably next week. But they leave them there. And they set them up, and they're like, hey, you know what? We want you to go ahead. We want to give you this now. You're responsible for this vineyard, and you're responsible for this right here. And they put these poor people in verse number 10, but Nebuzaradan, captain of the guard, left of the poor people land which had nothing in the land of Judah, and gave them vineyards and fields at the same time. He said, hey, look, we don't want this land to just go to waste. We don't want it to get all grown over with thorns and thistles and stuff. We want you to work the land. We want you to work the land, and sure, the understanding was going to be, you work the land, and we're going to let you have some of the stuff. We're going to let you have your freedom, but you know what? Whenever the grapes produce, you're going to be sending the grapes down to Babylon. And so, but in verse number 11, he says, now Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, gave charge concerning Jeremiah. Now, this is fascinating to me, because if you think about this, here is Jeremiah, and he has been around since basically, what was it, the 13th year of Josiah? I believe it was the 13th year of Josiah was when Jeremiah started his ministry. And so he's been around since the 13th year of Josiah. And so here we are, 18 and 22. So basically we're 40 years later. Around 40 years he's been in ministry. And really, again, with Josiah, everything was good, everything was great, everything was going great. But then once the other kings took over, nothing was good, nothing was great, nothing was going great. And we know, we've spoken multiple times about the relationship between Jeremiah and Zedekiah, and I think there was a respect there. But there was not a willingness to obey what Jeremiah was saying. But here you have the king of Babylon. The king of Babylon that, as far as I know, never actually spoke to Jeremiah. He never actually spoke to Jeremiah and never actually, communicated with Jeremiah. But somehow God had put in the heart of the king of Babylon a respect for Jeremiah that not even the kings of Judah, and I'm sure Josiah had a respect for him, but not even those future kings, not even Jehoiakim and Jehoiachin and Jeconiah, not even those guys had that respect for Jeremiah. But here comes the king of Babylon. And he says, hey, look, we're going to take this city, we're going to take this land, we're going to take it over. And when we take it over, I want you, I've got some orders for you. I've got some orders for you. And so it says that he tells the captain of the guard about Jeremiah. He said in verse number 12, take him and look well to him. Take him and look well to him. Hey, look, I want you to find him, and maybe Jeremiah had some distinguishing features that he was going to be easy to find, but take him and look well to him. Do not mistreat him. Do not treat him like any other captive. Do not treat him poorly. Do not let anyone in your charge. And you can imagine right here that when the king of Babylon is telling one of his servants under him, basically he put Jeremiah as Nebuzaradan. It became his responsibility to make sure word did not come back to Nebuchadnezzar that there was something that happened to Jeremiah. That, Jeremiah better have been he said, take him and look well to him. He better be well taken care of. He better be well taken care of. I better not hear that he's got a broken leg. I better not hear that he's got a broken arm. I better not hear that he's got a black eye. I better not hear one word except Jeremiah was well treated. He says, take him and look well to him and do him no harm, but do unto him even as he shall say unto thee. So he said, hey, look, he said, whatever he tells you, that's what you're going to do for him. If he tells you to rebuild the king's house and put him up in the king's house, y'all are going to rebuild the king's house and put him up in the king's house. If he tells you that you're going to burn the temple, and when you get done burning the temple, you're going to rebuild the temple, that's what I want him to do. That's what I want you to do for him. Why on earth, except for the wickedness of their heart and their just commitment to their idolatry and their rebellion towards God, could not one of these kings after Josiah have said, hey, whatever Jeremiah says, that's what we're going to do. Whatever he says, that's what we're going to do. Whatever he says, if he says this is what we need to do, that's what we're going to do. But they couldn't do it. They could not do it. And so he says, take him, look well to him, and do what he says unto you. So look at what happens. So in verse 13, so Nebuzaradan, the captain of the guard, sent Nebushashban, Rabsaris, Nergal-Sharezer, Ramag, and all the king of Babylon's princes. So they send this huge entourage. They send this huge entourage of all these important people to do one thing, to go find one person in the city. They were looking for one person. And guess where they found him? They found him where the king left him. Again, I mean, you think about this. Zedekiah's like, hey, they're about to overtake the city, and I'm going to escape, and I'm going to escape for my life. And he never even thought twice about Jeremiah. Never even crossed his mind, Brother Parks. He just left him in prison. I mean, you think about, again, if you were taking over something, and you were taking people captive, who's the last people you're going to take? You're going to go to the prison. Them's the last people you're going to take. And there's a good possibility you're like, hey, these people are probably in prison for a reason, and probably the best thing to do is they're probably just going to be a bunch of rabble-rousers, and they're probably just going to cause us a lot of heartache. So the best thing we can probably do is just get rid of all of them quick and just slay them all, because they're just going to be a thorn in our side forever. But that is not what the king of Babylon. He said, hey, I don't care where you find him. Once you do find him, I want you to treat him well and do whatever he says. So even they sent and took Jeremiah out of the court of the prison. So you can imagine there had to be conversations. And you think about this. Hey, they're asking the people of Judah, we're looking for someone. Who are you looking for? We're looking for Jeremiah. Can you imagine the people of Judah's reaction when they realized that they're looking for Jeremiah? Some people probably thought, oh, great, finally someone's going to finally do away with that guy that prophesied all this evil against us. And other people are thinking, how have we just listened to him? But they had to tell him, we haven't seen him. We haven't seen him in a long time. Why haven't you seen him? Well, because he's been in prison. And from what we hear, they keep bouncing him around from one prison to another to another. They keep bouncing him around. But they go and they find him in the prison. And look at what they do. And it says in verse number 14, they sent and took Jeremiah out of the court of the prison and committed him unto Gedaliah, the son of Ahiakim, the son of Shaphan, that he should carry him home. So he dwelt among the people. So Jeremiah said, look, I'm going to stay. I'm going to stay. I'm not going. I'm not going into captivity. I mean, you think about it. Brother Croft, Jeremiah had carte blanche from Nebuchadnezzar. Had Jeremiah said, hey, I want to go, and I want to be with the people in captivity, but I don't want to be just anywhere. I want a nice place in Babylon. Guess what? He had carte blanche. He had carte blanche from Nebuchadnezzar. But that's not what he said. He said, just let me just stay here. And they committed him to Gedaliah, who basically who Nebuchadnezzar is going to make like the governor. He's going to make like the governor. Now, I want you to see something right here. It says Gedaliah, the son of Ahikam, the son of Shaphan. So in 2 Kings, 22, and verse number 12. And so this is when Josiah, when they found the word of the Lord. This is when they found the word of the Lord, and this is Josiah. And the king commanded Hilkiah the priest and Ahikam the son of Shaphan. And Ahikam the son of Shaphan, and Achbor the son of Micaiah, and Shaphan the scribe, and Azahiah a servant of the king, saying, Go ye inquire of the Lord for me. So again, this is when they found the word of the Lord. And so here Ahikam is one of Josiah's trusted advisors. He's one of Josiah's trusted men, and so that was Ahikam. But you're also going to see Ahikam in Jeremiah chapter number 24, and I forgot to write the verse down. Jeremiah chapter number 24. It's at the end of the chapter. So chapter 24. Well, you know what? I'll tell you the story. So anyway, Jeremiah was Jeremiah, and there was another prophet, and the prophet prophesied, and they didn't like what he prophesied. I think in Jehoiakim's day, and when that prophet prophesied, that he left, and they went down to Egypt, and they took him and killed him, and they slew him. But it says that Ahikam. Ahikam, okay, all right. I found it. Chapter 26. Nevertheless, the hand of Ahikam, the son of Shaphan, was with Jeremiah, that they should not give him into the hand of the people to put him to death. So here's Ahikam again. First he was Josiah's trusted advisor. Now here he is, I think, like I said, I believe this is Jehoiakim. Yes, in Jehoiakim's time, that he's still trying to do good. Again, these other, Josiah's son and his grandson had no desire to serve God. But here's Ahikam still trying to do good. And at that time, he's protecting Jeremiah. But now here is Gedaliah, and we're going to look at him next week. But here is Gedaliah, who is the son of Ahikam. And it appears to me that probably what happened right here, and again, I'm not 100% sure, but it appears to me probably Gedaliah heeded the word of Jeremiah. He probably heeded the word of Jeremiah, and he left, and then Nebuchadnezzar realized, hey, I've got a really good man right here. I've got a really good man. I've got an honorable man. I've got a respectable man. And we're going to go in. We're going in. We're going to take the land. But I don't want to just leave the land. And so I'm going to set you up. I'm going to set you up as basically governor, and I'm going to let you be over the Judah and Jerusalem. I'm going to let you be over that. Once we take out Zedekiah. And so that's who the people, that's who the Chaldeans, that's who Nebuzaradan and all those people took Jeremiah to and said, hey, if you want to stay, here's Gedaliah. No doubt you're familiar with Gedaliah because you knew his father Ahikam. Here Gedaliah. The Nebuchadnezzar says, take care of Jeremiah. So whatever Jeremiah wants, now you're responsible for whatever Jeremiah wants. So then you get to verse number 15, and I'm trying to hurry because I really want to finish this part this week. So again, if y'all remember, one of the times when Jeremiah was in prison, it was this Ethiopian that went to Zedekiah and said, hey, this is not right. He's going to die down there. He's just down there. He's way down in a dungeon. He's down in this mire. There's no water down there. If you don't do something, he's going to die. And the king said, yes, go ahead, take him out. And if you remember, he got those old cast cloths and those rags, and he sent those rags down so that Jeremiah could put those rags up under his arm, so when they pulled him up with cords, it wouldn't rope burn his arms and his chest whenever they pulled him up. That was this guy that we're talking about here. It says in verse 16, go speak to Ebed-melech the Ethiopian. Now this is God told Jeremiah to go speak to him. Thus saith the Lord of hosts, the God of Israel, behold, I will bring my words upon this city for evil, not for good. Again, it's out of order. It's out of chronological order. So this was before this happened. But he said, hey, look, I want you to understand that this city is going to fall. But look at what he says. Look at what he says in verse 7. But I will deliver thee in that day. He said, look, I'm going to deliver you. Because, saith the Lord, and thou shalt not be given to the hand of the men of whom thou art afraid. He said, look, I know you're afraid. I know you're afraid. Again, he's an Ethiopian in the land of Judah. He's an Ethiopian, and he's a servant. And no doubt he's like, man, I don't have any friends here. I mean, what happens whenever you have a problem? I mean, I guarantee if something happens in here, every mother, if something happens during church, every mother, the first thing they're going to do is they're not going to go try and help Brother Croft out. That's not who they're going to look for. They're going to look for their children. Miss Shirley may not even help Brother Croft out, but they're going to help their children. You're going to protect those that are important to you. And he's like, hey, look, I'm in trouble here. Whenever this happens, I'm in trouble. But God looked at this Ethiopian eunuch's heart and said, hey, you did this for me. You did this for my prophet when no one else cared about him. Not one other person went to the king and said, hey, this can't be this way. Not one other person tried to help him out. You went and said, hey, he's going to die if you leave him down there. God said, for I will surely deliver thee. Thou shalt not fall by the sword. Again, here's this fear. They're just going to slay me. They're just going to kill me. But thy life shall be for a prey unto thee, because thou hast put thy trust in me. God said, hey, I saw who you are. I know who you are. I know what you did, but I know that you put your trust in me. And in the day when all this misery is coming on everyone else because you put your trust in me, I'm going to take care of you that day. Thank you.